Thank you, Maddie. Hey, everybody. Hello. Hello, everybody. Well, at least this way, I know that people aren't paying attention instead of Zoom, where I know that nobody's paying attention. Yeah. People, it is good to be back. I have not been to a SecKC in person since the one that we did before the pandemic. I know there was the COVID and there were babies and other things, but here we are. But before I get too far into this, there are some people here that, first of all, we're back in person, right? It's really, frankly, something to be pretty excited about, and I've not had a chance to acknowledge in person all of the people that stood up to keep this going during the pandemic when we were at home, but then also to get our asses out of the house again and off of just Discord and sitting and getting together in person again.
Look how big yours looks!
Yeah! And I'm skinny now. What's up with that? So yeah, so a little bit of background before I get started. I don't know if you've followed the larger canon of my work, but when I get, thank you, it's the true fans that I'm here for. When I gave my talk a number of years ago to SecKC, talking about how to give talks, I might have mentioned offhand that the reason I don't really give talks like DEF CON or stuff like that anymore is that it's been a while since I thought that I had something worthwhile to say. And essentially that if I thought something was important enough and more important than the thoughts of all you guys have, then maybe I'll go ahead and say, I'm ready for the mic. So the last time that I really got up for original content that I felt in my fucking bones that I had to absolutely get a microphone in my hand as soon as I could was 2008. So I thank you all for coming back to see something new. I've been doing it's been a wild 60 days. And I kid you not, it's been 60 days since I started working on this. Including the holidays. It's been hard for me to kind of come up with a good title for this. In part because my head has gone through a number of different kinds of perspective changes through this whole kind of thing. People that are in my orbit can maybe attest to this. If you get close to me and you show that you are online, you're going to hear some things right now. This also happens in person, other parents that I run into, the teachers at the swimming lessons, it doesn't matter. But over time, as I keep talking about this and I keep learning more, my approach to this talk has kind of changed. So first, I have this kind of, typical hacker has, let's tell everybody how and why they're wrong. But then I really thought about this and I realized, we're not wrong. Because the more I get into this, I realize that what this does to us. So I keep going through all of these different options here, but these are this should help understand the theme. The English language is back, people. If you guys have been spending time learning Python, English is the new language to learn. We're going to get into that. Tonight we're going to talk about tokens. How many people have heard about tokens? In and out, and cloud storage, and how much is this going to cost, and all of everything like that. How many people are going to now sell this to somebody that has never heard of variable pricing in the cloud at all? Ever. Okay? I don't know if you guys know what a big change that is going to be and how hard that is going to be. But frankly, it's going to be made a lot harder by the fact that a lot of this stuff is available for you right now for a very, very small amount of money. All of it. And all of this stuff that has totally broken my brain over the last 60 days, you can do right now for a very low amount of budget. No cloud infrastructure or any of that kind of shit. Other alternate things to show you, again, the English language is back. Finally, the one that really is the most popular, but maybe gives away the ending of this just a little bit.
I ask that every day, John.
Yes. Well, get ready, parents, because this might actually change the way that you talk to just about it.
What a nerd!
All right, so since I do pay attention to my own talks, you're like, oh my God, this is going to be a talk about LLMs and all I'm going to see is fucking text on the screen. No, I'm not going to do that. In part because what I've learned about AI and the way that you should be working with this kind of stuff is that it's about words and it's about listening and it's about communicating. Okay? So I'm going to talk a lot about this stuff. We're not going to talk about a lot of examples. But I want everybody to listen to kind of the story that I've got here and then set yourself off on this own kind of path. So we're going to talk a little bit about where I was as recently as November in kind of my thinking, my approach, when people asked me what I thought about this, how I got to that point, but then also talk about the, frankly, seemingly random confluence of events that led me to re-examine all of this kind of thing. And show you how I went from being fairly untrustworthy and treating it like it's a punchline and treating like yeah, it's better than the blockchain, but that's a goddamn low bar, right? So, but I've moved from this holding pattern into, holy cow, we've got to get going. So we'll talk about how I got from there to where I am now. Talk about some of my own experiences and what this is actually like and why I think that if you haven't actually gone down this point where you're actually thinking about all this heady, weird stuff and you find yourself pulling out copies of David Foster Wallace, I don't know that you're working with AI at the level that you need to prepare yourself for the wave of change that's going to come.
Okay, I didn't know that until...
So, whew, hot little potato. What else are we going to do? We're going to talk a little bit about the way that this stuff and the way that I've worked with this has changed me in ways that were incredibly surprising. It's changed the way that I talk to people. It's changed the way that I listen to people. And it's changed it for the better. People, I feel great right now. I got a lot of close friends here that know that it's been a bumpy few years. I feel better today than I have in a long time. And honestly, I think part of it's because of this work that I've been doing. And I'll explain why, and I'm not going to say there's any kind of replacement for any professional help or something, but I'm going to explain why I think this is happening and why it's such a positive impact. Then we're going to go into some of the actual kinds of experiments that I've been doing, some of the work that I've been doing. I'm going to show you some examples. I'm going to talk through some examples too. I'm going to kind of contextualize them because, at least in my world, in case you guys don't know, first of all, damn, I almost forgot about this. Nothing I'm about to say or just said is endorsed by my employer. I'm not going to share their name. No. I work in digital forensics and e-discovery, and I've got a law degree, and yeah, I've got all those things. I've taken lots of tests and don't want to take any more. But I approach this through the lens of somebody that went to law school, works for a big law firm, but frankly, I got to a big law firm in a very non-traditional way. So I started working in small town law firm, old law firm. Law firm's so old that if you want to send mail to that law firm, you can just send it to Law Office, Harrisonville, Missouri, and it will get there. That's how old that building was, right? So I learned back in the late 90s how to do research when everything was on paper and the electronic archives were sitting on CDs in a CD changer. It was a thing, right? But that's how I learned. That's not important. Or is it? Come back to that. But what I'm kind of finding is that a lot of the old models of thinking, the old models of working with things that we had before we just had a text box are going to be the things that actually make this the most worthwhile. So we're going to go through, we're going to show some of the stuff that I've done, some of the stuff that's totally blown my mind. I'll show you some specific examples, I'll pull up some specific threads and talk to you through some things. But first, even though I appreciate the quiet and seeming rapt attention, now I do feel like I'm doing a Zoom call again.
We're all watching you.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I'm going to just read this, and you're not allowed to, oh, good, you can't see this. I'm going to read something, all right? Counselor, while a comprehensive security assessment would be prudent, allow me to offer some initial recommendations on areas of focus from what I can infer from these results. First, you should be concerned that your network parameter was penetrated and internal assets were exposed to enumeration. Audit logs for clues of how they access your systems without authorization. They could have been compromised credentials, could have been unpatched VPNs, could have been phishing links. Once these are evident, we need to remedy those vulnerabilities. Next, policy-wise, we need to stress test and least privilege, employ security first design, limit SSH, model zero trust, port 53 can be firewalled everywhere but your name servers, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Skip a little bit ahead. While assessing the full implications will require an expert analysis, I can speak to some of the common certification standards that may be impacted. Okay. And finally, I give a little bit of additional information, and I get this. Counselor, if thorough investigation confirms that this incident was limited to surface level reconnaissance and probing without any subsequent intrusion, data access, or system disruption, then reporting requirements may differ. This goes on to explain what the reporting requirements are under HIPAA, ISO 27001, and then says the good news is that at least right now this appears to be an exploratory rather than exploitative, but fully tracing the attacker's path while closing off discovered deficiencies is still called for to uphold certification security posture plans. That was a lot of words. That was a lot of words that sounds like a very expensive report, or maybe somebody got paid a lot by the hour to send that in. You all know that somebody did not get paid a lot of money to make that. The question is, do you know what the input was to generate that level of content? Would anybody like to take a guess? Yes, sir.
We don't know how they got in. Here's why you need to fix it.
Sure. But what was the input that I fed to the LLM that led me to get those recommendations and those specific words addressed to the general counsel of the theoretical company?
Yes. Tell them where they need to fix it.
You're missing. Anybody else? The source. What was the initial prompt for all of that?
Tell them their shit's fucked.
The initial prompt was an Nmap scan. I literally copied and pasted the output from Nmap being run against a Raspberry Pi on my own network. I pasted it in, and I said, the scenario is that we found a laptop and this was on the screen. What do we do now? And within 4 prompts, I got to those recommendations at that level of writing and that level of sophistication. If you all are used to reading the fairly bland, vanilla, gray goo of dialect that is ChatGPT or GPT-4, friends, I encourage you to go meet something better. If that level of analysis and that level of sophistication of handling the output of an Nmap scan sounds perhaps frightening or interesting, hopefully I now have your attention. Come back to some of those specifics later on here. But then I'm going to talk about why I am super fired up about all this. There's a lot of stuff that people are worried about. There are a lot of people with real legitimate concerns about how this impacts their livelihoods, how this impacts their artwork, how this impacts culture overall. But we all need to kind of step back and look at this through our own little lens. We're going to get into that about a little why. And it gets fairly deep, but I think we're all going to understand it as we go. I got a lot to say, so we're going to keep on moving. If you have questions, we'll chat after. Let's start by kind of establishing some common ground and talk about a little bit about what maybe I will consider for purposes of this evening to be conventional wisdom. And I absolutely understand that everybody in this room probably has a little bit of a greater understanding of the way all this stuff works and probably has something different than what I would call conventional wisdom. That's fine, but it's also important for us to ground ourselves in what the rest of the world is saying and thinking and expecting and things like this. So I started playing around with large language models just like everybody else did. A little bit over a year ago, ChatGPT, of course, is upon the scene. I get inside there. Everybody's kind of doing some things. People are losing their minds because it's, oh, apparently an expert at everything. Finally, I get around to it, right? And I'm like, all right, fine. I'm a lawyer. What am I going to do? You say you can pass the bar exam. I ask you a very simple law exam kind of question, law school exam question. It gives me a fairly bland response. Factually oriented, read like something from Wikipedia. It got typed out in front of me. It didn't really add anything beyond what I already knew. It was information retrieval, right? So how many people do you talk to, or how many of you in this room use these systems for information retrieval? It's very different than the way that I'm going to talk about the way that maybe you should be thinking about how to use this stuff. Retrieval is one thing, right? Then you're worrying about the hallucinations. But at that point, I'm like, okay, it can retrieve information. So can just about anything else. Now what? It says that it can be a lawyer. People say that this is going to replace lawyers. I fight. If you want to be a lawyer, then you have to fight me. You have to win. You have to get into an argument. You have to engage with me on it. So what do I pick? Baseball, right? So I get out there and I start arguing with ChatGPT, or I ask ChatGPT, to explain why Bo Jackson is the greatest athlete to ever live, and why, right? Fairly non-controversial statement, right, Internet? Anyway, so I started having this conversation. It generally kind of went along with me because it's hard to dispute that. But then I asked, hey, who do you think the greatest hitters in baseball history ever were? And it spits out a list. And it lists Barry Bonds, but it doesn't list Pete Rose. And I'm like, there's a logical fallacy that I want to argue with a large language model about. Folks, I have no special affinity for Pete Rose. Pete Rose is a known asshole. Okay, that's fine. Pete Rose got a raw deal, deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. It's the Hall of Fame for baseball, not the Hall of Fame for baseball and not being an asshole. But what pissed me off about it was that the model was essentially saying the greatest hitter in baseball is, hamstrung by this additional requirement that he not bet on baseball. Even though these guys are over here juicing it up and totally cheating, arguably. And they're still in the Hall of Fame, and they're still in consideration. And so I started arguing baseball, and ChatGPT just wilts. It's like, oh, people have opinions on this. They're strong. And it's like, you won't ever fight me. This is a waste of time. Then I go and I have it write some scripts for me, right? I'm like, great. Fewer trips to Stack Exchange. Hooray. Then I start telling people, I was like, hey, this is great. It's actually really good. It'll teach you how to write some basic shell scripts. And if you have a question about Windows, shit, Microsoft bought these people. It should know something about Windows, right? Well, then I get this message from a person on my team, and they're like, hey, so I had this idea to delete all the files inside of a folder structure, leaving the folder structure there. And I asked ChatGPT how I would do that. This answer seems fishy. And I immediately pick up the phone and I say, do not do any of that, oh my God. Because ChatGPT very confidently gave her instructions through the GUI on how to just delete about, massive quantities of data that I deal with in my job. So that was the last time that I started telling people to go to ChatGPT to write code, especially if they didn't know what the hell they were doing already, right? So you can see my levels of trust just being eroded. I haven't even talked about the privacy disaster that those bozos have unleashed upon the world. I pay for a pro account. How many people here pay for a pro account? How many people feel pissed off that you're still paying $20 and they're training their model on everything that you talk to it about? That's fucking bullshit. I pay money. If you want more money for privacy, I'm happy to pay it. But goddamn. Sorry. Hot little potato. Take it easy, fella. Woo! Anyhow, so what we're dealing with is that essentially ChatGPT is out here being untrustworthy with anything you give it. It's giving kind of marginal output that everybody's out there saying, oh my God, it's going to change the world, right? Meanwhile, the hackers get after it, and then we're like making them do things, and the muggles are all concerned, and then the people out there that should be the voices of reason are out there making these wild and outlandish claims, right? I mean, you got Rocket Boy, and you got Sam Altman out there talking about how he's going to put chips in people's brains. This is not helpful. This is not serious discussion. I'm sorry. These people need to go away. It might be wonderful that they had wonderful contributions at some point, but get out of the way. It's distracting to the people that are going to be helped the most by this kind of thing. So that kind of persists, right? I mean, we all go to DEF CON. Big punchline Hacker Jeopardy was AI, right? So here we are at conventional wisdom. Conventional wisdom, probably amongst us, is, yeah, it's kind of interesting. We'll kind of see. Everybody kind of retrenches back from users being really interested in this and users actually asking for technology instead of IT telling people the technology that they should use. Oh my God, thank God they've gone away. Now we can go back and talk about our enterprise software. We can go back to our top-down model again. That's kind of where I kind of see things right now. Now, a lot of people doing a lot of work with this stuff in this room even. That's cool. I'm doing a lot of work on this too. It's not everybody. But having talked to lots and lots of people and just damn near every person that will stand close to me, I think that is a fairly decent reflection of what's out there. And I think the level of confusion that people have about what the worst case scenario is, in part because ChatGPT is training on all the data, right? You know, you never had Google be like, yeah, we're going to read your mail and we're going to give you ads. It's great. Come on in, it's free though. I don't think people would have signed up for Gmail that way. Yet a lot of people are in here doing this. I did recently learn that you can pay even more money and set up your own little team of one. Which maybe, but right now I just write garbage code that I don't care about. So that's good enough for me for now, but I am still super annoyed at the privacy issue. So I'm there as recently as November. I go to law school. I teach a class on, well, it was a seminar class, and I talked about not AI, because I figured these kids were probably tired of hearing about AI. So I talked about forensics and everything like that. And at the end, I asked them what their take was and how they were all using it. And then I discovered what the level of discourse about this kind of thing is in an academic setting. And that level of discourse is everybody shuts the fuck up and acts like really awkward and they don't talk. And I'm like, really? You guys aren't going to talk about? I was like, oh, right, your professor's sitting there. Okay. And the other guy's there. So nobody's actually talking honestly about how they're using this. Finally, I actually did get, I found a, God, I think he's maybe 14 now, lives next door to me. He was out shooting basketball with his brother, and I was like, hey, let's talk about these large language models. What are you doing? He's like, I don't know. I was like, I won't tell your dad. Okay, here's the deal. The smart kids are using it, and the smart kids are getting away with it. The dumb kids are using it, and they're getting caught. And I go like, oh, that sounds like high school. So the kids, I think, are okay, at least in that regard. But it's fairly important, right? I mean, and people in academia, they have their own thing, they have their own lens. But the things I've been doing, like certainly any kind of, we've got to just lock all this stuff down, or we've got to act like it doesn't exist, you've got to treat it like it does nothing but plagiarization, it misunderstands the potential of this technology when you use it in the ways that I've been using it over the past few weeks. Hand waving, and you're like, oh my God, show me the stuff. Show me the stuff. So, what happens? How did all this change? So, it just happenstance, I actually had a new project management system approved for the firm, for my team. And I got access to it in probably September. And I started moving all my documentation, all the notes in there, and trying to like get stuff ready because I got this big cloud migration and getting all my people ready to go. And I'm like, ooh, this is super cool. I'll say the words and I show it later on. I'm playing with Notion, right? How many people have used Notion before? Oh man, you guys. Can get $8 ready. So I get in there, and I'm having a great time because, oh my God, this is software that isn't garbage, right? I'm sitting there, I'm rocking my baby, and I'm making relational databases on my phone. I'm like, dude, this is crazy town. But I'm like over-engineering the whole thing, right? I'm thinking about, okay, I got to make this easy. I got to find forms. I got to do checklists. You know, I'm going to make this super simple for all my team. Meanwhile, there's this thing that's like, hey, you know, Notion's got this AI thing. And I'm like, oh God. No. Just no. I can ignore it. It's on. They give me free, you know, tokens or whatever that nonsense. I don't want it, in part because I can't trust it. And I also know what it's like to have a conversation with anybody at the law firm that's already had the appropriate lecture of this shit is toxic, run away, right? So I get this in there, and I keep seeing this stuff, and we even have a call and a demo, and I talk to somebody over there. It's like, hey guys, I want to show this stuff that I'm doing because I think this is helpful for my team, and I want to show other people about it. But as soon as they see this AI feature, people are going to wig out, and they're going to ignore everything else because they think everything is GPT 3.5 that's going to hoover up all the stuff and feed it to everybody else. And I talk to them, and they're like, well, we'll see what we can do. And then all of a sudden I get this message that says, hi, you've been added to the Notion Q&A beta. Click here to learn more. I'm like, oh God, another AI thing. I click on it. I was like, well, there's the ChatGPT thing, but then there's this other model. What about this Anthropic thing? I don't know anything about that. Then I start reading. I read a little bit. I was like, oh, well, that's pretty good privacy model. Then I get out the actual privacy docs for Notion, and I get the privacy docs for Anthropic. I start reading. I was like, oh, this is a very different ballgame. Let's see what this can do. So I run out, and I sign up for Claude. Now, I signed up for Claude. Claude has been around for a little bit. Claude is now on 2.1. Right, so I get into Notion, I got my Notion stuff. I'm still not bought in, I'm just curious though. So I call the boss, and I say, hey, they turned this thing on, the privacy seems fine, maybe we'll give it a shot and see what we think. So I call her around my group, I was like, hey, click that thing, ask it a question. Oh wow, that's neat. It's like, yeah, that's training all of our documentation. No kidding. Immediately, well, I gave it a week. And I called everybody. I said, okay, here's the deal. That feature was kind of here, like, as beta. And we're now out of tokens, because, surprise, surprise, I used all the tokens. And I said to him, I was like, hey, so, I think I kind of liked this. I liked this so much that I'd pay $8 of my own money to keep this around. Would you pay $8 of your own money? And to a person on my group, and I have a very diverse group of people, to a person, that answer was unhesitatingly, I would pay $8 of my own money. Just make sure that that does not go away. It's like, ooh, that's interesting. So I kind of let that roll. Meanwhile, I start kind of playing with Claude. And with Claude, right, a lot of this is the kind of exploration that you probably might have done with GPT. Like try to figure out how it works, talk to it, see if you can make it do stupid things. But I started talking to it about its philosophy, how it treated, the way that it treated things inside of there. I took all of the privacy documentation. I explained, hey, I'm doing an evaluation of privacy. Tell me all the different paperwork that I need to go, and I'll feed it into you, and we'll do this analysis. And I did the exact same thing on that in GPT 3.5. And I read them both by hand, and I double-checked that everything was good. It wasn't that hard, right? Got through pretty quick. And I established somewhat of a level of trust. Say, I can start putting stuff in here. Maybe some interesting stuff, maybe not some interesting stuff, but I can put more stuff in here. So I start putting more stuff in there. And I'm busy, right? I got a 5-year-old, I got a 1-year-old, I got a 1-year-old that has, well, he really prefers to sleep in my king-size bed. So for reasons unrelated to this, I'd already kind of been relegated to the couch for a little while. But almost all this stuff has been happening like after I go to bed. So as this, as happens, occasionally somebody in my life will walk in, and right when I'm in the middle of something else, will set off some fucking fire. And I'm like, oh god damn it, I didn't have time for this. And then it ends up turning into something completely amazing. And god damn it, if Bill Swearingen didn't open up a big fucking can of worms by starting a single signal thread, making a lot of people mad. And I was busy that day, and I know there were a lot of emotions that were out there, and that was good, we all worked it all out. But I don't know if you all noticed this, but I wasn't involved in any of that. And then you woke up the next morning, and suddenly there's like this pep talk for the old man. It's like, hey, you guys worked all this stuff out. Here's an agenda for your next meeting. Here's an analysis of this. Here's an analysis of that. Get going, everybody. And then I went back to my work, and you saw the results of that, right? So how did that happen? And it was this, right? And this is a good kind of factual scenario, because while I'm not any of your lawyers, and I'm not the lawyer of this organization, am I in charge of the code of conduct? Yes, I am in charge of the code of conduct team.
So you're my lawyer.
No, I'm not. Quit trying. You and Civiac, I swear to God. So Bill has this, he sets off this fire, and it's in Discord. And I'm like, man, several people were typing for many times today. How long is it going to take me to go through this entire thread of hacker drama to figure out what's going on? Because I have concerns. I have multiple concerns, right? First and foremost, it's the organization. It's keeping this together, making sure that this stays together. So I've got to figure out, is there an active fire that needs to be sorted out right now? Second, are there any interpersonal relationships that need to be mediated? Because these are folks that I'm very close with. And I asked around, people on that night got messages. I said, hey, did you see this shit go down? I need a clear-eyed view of what the fuck just what happened. And nobody could give me a clear-eyed view. Everybody had something to say, which was fine. But I needed a clear-eyed view. And faced with very little time, but a gigantic context window in Claude, I say, what do I have to lose? I'm comfortable with the privacy. This was all in public chat. Let's drop in and see what happens. Called a member of the Code of Conduct team, make sure they were all good with it. They're like, yeah, that's all good. See what you can do. I get in and I start asking about 2 questions. First of all, the data preparation.
Wait, I want to know what the questions were.
I'll pull them up. I got no problem. I mean, if we want to review it, it's just boring as this, right? Because it's fascinating. And actually that issue of the audit trail is super important going forward. You'll see why, because I'll show you what I did after I did Discord. So I do digital forensics. I do mobile forensics, I do e-discovery. One of the biggest challenges that we have right now is dealing with short messages for lots of different reasons. In part because the software that we've got in the legal business assumes that everything essentially can be reduced to a Word document. It's a silly assumption, but it's the model we work under. I bitched about this one I did in 2008, and it's still happening today, so it's not going to go away. Short messages are hard, and frankly, it's probably $1 billion problem for somebody to solve. 6 months ago it was. People are out there actively working on this right now, talking about, we got solutions in the pipeline. So I break out all of my forensic skills, and I go to the top of the thread, and I start copying text until I get to the bottom of the thread, and I put it into a text editor, so I made sure I had it all. I didn't clean up anything, not a thing, and I pasted it in. And I got results that were immediately so shocking that I reached out to the other person on the Code of Conduct board, and I said, you need to see this right now. People, the short message document review problem in e-discovery is solved. It was solved by accident. And listening to a podcast from somebody at Anthropic, they solved this problem by accident because they really liked Slack and they really liked Claude. So they now have Claude doing active summarization of all of their stuff. So they have daily logs and all this other kind of stuff that just gets kicked out as something you can read. I have no idea how hard that is. And in this podcast, this lady just like mentions it, and I was like, whoa, 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 back up. Hold on. This changes everything. So, at some point, we'll talk about sentiment analysis, okay? So in e-discovery, one of the biggest things right now is, hey, we're going to use this to identify the spiciest emails, and we're going to use machine learning to do it. We waited a long time for that model to be trained. The end result of that really exciting sounding thing ended up being, hey, here's a score 50-50 greater or less about whether or not it's an angry email or not. I don't mean to diminish the work that gentleman put into that, but frankly, when I pulled it up and I saw no great pictures, and I saw, oh, well, that just has all of the emails that have the profanity. I know how to search for profanity too. Let's move along to the next thing that's going to change the world, and then doesn't end up doing it. So that's kind of the level of the state of the art right now. I pull this thing in here, and anybody that wants to do this later on, or if you want me to share this in the AI thread, I'll talk to the people that were involved, make sure that nobody's, still got any hard feelings about it. But it was identifying level of sentiment. It identified people that were insiders versus outsiders. I asked it, one of the more interesting things about one individual, when it gave me a chart, kid you not, a chart of the people that were most involved in all the conversations, and whether they were long-standing members or new members, there was one mismatch. And I was like, that's interesting. And I said, why did you do that? On initial reflection, you think, oh, well, it's a hallucination because it's hallucinating. It comes back and it says, this is the language that he used that indicates that he was feeling like an outsider in the situation. It's a level of sophistication of semantic analysis that, given this current state of the art everywhere else, was astounding. Astounding. One of the problems that I've heard people in the data science field that are currently gatekeeping a lot of this stuff, they have concerns about how do we decide what the sentiment is of the different stuff that's, the different reaction gifts in Discord, for example. Giving away something later on, but I don't care, right? I mean, yeah, that's an issue, but I'll worry about that later on. There's a whole lot of words that have a lot of meaning that are more important. So let's not gatekeep all this stuff just because of emoji, eh? All right, so I get into this and I see this kind of semantic analysis, and I'm completely blown away. And at this point, I'm like, all right, what other kind of random garbage text in mass can I throw to it? I take 6 months of text messages, my own. One of the things I do when I do forensics, and I do clients, I tell this to them, anytime I get a new piece of software, I do forensics on my own phone. Because looking at your own text messages is creepy. But I gotta look at somebody else's text messages in a spreadsheet, and I want them to know that I've looked at my own stuff, and I know how disturbing and how much trust is involved in giving me all of their cell phone data to help the company with a lawsuit, okay? Let me tell you, when you know that this thing is going to give you a clear-eyed, objective view on your conversations that you've had with people that you've talked to over the next 6 months, or it can go through and identify semantics, or it can give you advice or point out things that you might have done. That thread didn't last very long in Claude. I saw enough real fast to say, I need to go have a little bit of a thought about what this all means to me, and go watch that episode of Black Mirror about, like, the one where it records your entire life, right? So if you haven't revisited whether or not you set that auto-delete policy on your text messages on your iPhone, maybe it's time to think about doing that again, because it's dark. It's dark when you stare at that prompt, and it's like, oh, it's going to tell you everything that you never wanted to know about yourself, right there. So yeah, esoteric crises. Into the text messages, and by the way, I imported all that into a Claude thread with a CSV. That's all. No fancy shit, no training. I got so much to get through. You got questions, I got answers maybe, but later. So I go through, and again, like precision, recall, something like this. I I can verify this. I can see the results with my own eyes, right? Talk through with people. I don't need math to see that this thing is working, to see that this is having any kind of an impact. So I keep dumping stuff in. I keep dumping stuff into this thing. And I take a 6-hour deposition transcript of Donald Trump in the state of New York. 6 hours. Now, I did a little bit of cleanup because it was a PDF. I wrote some scripts, which, boy, I couldn't have done that without ChatGPT, so I'll say that about Miss Clippy. She'll help me with that for sure. So Miss Clippy helps me write some scripts, and we'll get back to why I call it Miss Clippy. So I get all this stuff cleaned up, and I get 6 hours of testimony in there, and I start asking questions. Now, in Claude, right, I mean, everything has a cap, so it can't bring in general knowledge about Donald Trump, and it was being very objective anyway. But I asked it to go through and generate a chart displaying all of the differing property valuations given by differing organizations over time for the different Trump Organization properties, and it gave me a markdown table. Out of 6 hours of nothing but deposition testimony. Not a single exhibit, not a single spreadsheet, literally just the words that were said out loud. Banana pants, what that will do. And this thing costs $20 a month. $20 a month. So, I keep going. I will share kind of one thing before I get into kind of the heady kind of stuff, but you can tell that it's, at some point I've got like damn near total trust in this. And again, it takes kind of a personal situation to kind of push you through that next level. A couple of weeks ago, I had a real bad day. Don't need to talk about why it was a bad day. Everybody has bad days, right? Had a bad day. It was still a bad day after I got the kids down. I still had to get some stuff off my chest. I was like, well, I could sit here and like play Destiny, or I could rant at Claude for a little bit. So I turned on the microphone and I started ranting, complaining about the day, complaining about what happened, just let it all out, right? Claude summarized it back and sorted, and when I said, what do you think about this situation? I kid you not, it cut through every bit of stuff that didn't actually matter. All the stuff that I brought up that doesn't actually matter, it dropped it all. And showed me the things that did matter. And I felt better after I did it. So I'm not going to act like I'm something that I'm not. But in terms of, if you've got a bad day and you just got to get something off your chest and have somebody realign your perspective, kind of like calling your old man, to be like, hey, I got my ass kicked today, what do I do? And he says, well, you already know what you need to do. Why did you call me? That's a little bit of what this kind of thing can do. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about how do we use this, and why are the things that I'm saying, these things sound like they have real impact, right? Yet I also said that you can just like dump in a Nmap scan as an initial prompt. I tried to make this thing do things I've wanted systems to do for a long time, right? Like manage my calendar, and I'm trying to come up with scripts to like import the calendar into this and essentially build my own secretary. But I keep approaching it as if I'm programming a computer, you know? I'm building systems, I'm building some kind of process. One of the things I've absolutely learned is that the way to interact with any large language model is to talk to it. To talk to it with your actual voice. And there was a great talk at Microsoft Ignite by a couple of guys that do a tremendous job of explaining how this stuff works to lay people in a way that makes this all seem way less scary, right? It shows the fact that it's not intelligent, it's just making guesses, that kind of deal. One of the things the guy from Microsoft says, and it's true, we're all trying to figure out right now, what do you call these things? How do you address them? Is it a person, is it not a person? All of that. And in my experience, you absolutely treat it like a person. Because it's treated on language. It wants to be treated like a person. It wants to treat you like a person. And I think that actually works well for both models when you're not writing code. I can't, like if you guys are getting solid results by typing words into the keyboard, keep on keeping on. But if you're doing something else, get your hands off the keyboard and start talking out loud. But what I've learned along the way, and you can think about this, right? You guys have interacted with this in the same kind of fashion. The way that you properly talk to this, which, all right, here's a hot take. Prompt engineering is a euphemism generated by people that can't speak using natural language to make themselves feel better about the fact that they can't communicate. Okay? I know that there are resources out there about prompt engineering. I've looked at them, I read them, I'm like, what? And then I went back to talking to it and I saw the results and I'm like, this is all nonsense. Talk to it.
Put the gut down.
You've got to talk to it. So, but in talking to it, and even if you're typing into it, and this is where the kind of rewiring of your brain starts to happen. What are you doing when you're effectively talking to these things? You're going to tell it something, you're going to give it detail, you're going to give it more detail. In fact, the more detail, the more the system understands why this is important, and it knows more about and it gives you a better response, right? We all get email, I get email. Occasionally I'll get email from somebody in my office that just has the entire email in the subject line, no please or thank you, just, I need these PDFs. That's not going to give them, that's going to elicit a response on the part of the recipient. And this kind of gets into the fact that we've all kind of forgotten how to communicate. After working with these systems and iterating and understanding and getting it back in your mind, that you need to talk to somebody, explain to somebody why it matters. And then you need to ask it if it has any other questions to make sure it understands. And then you need to ask it to say it back to you so that you know that they grok the thing. And then you move on with your life. That's not groundbreaking rocket science or computer science, but this is the way that you talk to a large language model. But it's also how you talk to people. And some point along the way, we've all forgotten how to talk to one another. I don't know whether it's because we have the screens in front of us, because we're so used to thinking in smaller little bits. But when people say, I use ChatGPT or I use AI to help write email, I envision them saying, hey, send an email to this person, tell them to help desk ticket, and then they walk away. Yesterday, so unfortunately I'm in the car market again, which worked out really badly the last time. That's a whole other thing. But I got to go pick up a car, so I got to email my insurance agent and say, hey, I got to get it. Here's the VIN number for the new deal, and I'm in Notion, and it's got all my stuff in there, so it already knows my agent's address and everything like that. So it's primed and ready to go. And I get on, and I'm just talking out loud. I was like, hey, draft this email, yada, yada, yada. For context, so that you understand what the tone is, you know, Sherry and I, she's been my agent for a number of years. You know, we want to keep this professional, but frankly, you know, she helped me out to a really hard claim. It was really nice, and so make it sound, you know, not totally impersonal. It spits out an email that matches exactly that tone. But Claude, and I don't know whether ChatGPT would do this, and this is why one model matters versus the other. Claude comes back and inserts a paragraph at the end, thanking her for all of her help on the other claim. If I've been sending that message, and I've been using my fingers to type that, all of those kinds of contextual feelings and expressions of gratitude to give context and help that recipient to feel like I'm not treating them like they are a virtual assistant. My heavens, when she called me back after merely getting a genuine thank you as part of an email, the reaction was unreal. Most of the people on my team are now using this in their day-to-day lives. And I've got one person that, and you can kind of see the arc, because Claude has a little bit of a dialect, at least initially, and I could tell that she had sent somebody an email using Claude, because it was extra friendly, but sent it to a person in another organization who's fairly shy. Quiet person, probably somebody like here. It elicited a response including exclamation points and thank yous on a Friday night when the request was to go do something awful. But merely because there was that little bit of extra effort that was freed up to give context and teach somebody about why this kind of matters to my brain instead of what matters to get this crap out of my fingers, there's something else there. The thing about the parenting, and this is important, if you, I shit you not, if you have a small child around, I have a 5-year-old, he's a pandemic kid, so because he's a pandemic kid, he's playing way more video games than he should, and he's playing way more video games at a more advanced level than he should. But here we are, pandemic kids, right? Just like any other kid. He's got problems shutting it off and walking away. We did the timer thing, we did the yelling thing, we did the taking it away kind of thing. But then, you live with a 5-year-old, you just know how this is. You're like, I've told you 1,000 times, but you never listen. But did I ever actually check to see if he listened? No. So I've changed the way that I talk to my 5-year-old. When I talk to him about things that we do, I tell him what we're going to do, and I'm going to tell him why it's important. And then I ask him to say it back to me. I keep just literally like you are talking to an LLM. And the difference in the behavior out of him is night and day. Night and day. Right now, he is at home, and I guarantee you, he is in bed right now. Because at this point, I've gotten to the point with him where he is responsible enough because he knows that it's important to get up to bed, and why. We've talked through the plan. I know he knows what the plan is. So when Mom turns off the timer, he's going to get up and go. The impact is, it really is hard to explain. After giving this stuff to my team, first of all through Notion, while we're kind of moving through a massive change out to the cloud, different platform, it's Christmas time. The cutover to do new stuff over in the new deal was December 15th. And as you might imagine, people like to ask me questions because I know a couple things about the system that we're moving, right? I'm the first point of, I'm the first point of escalation. Over Christmas break, while people were continuing to work, I got 0. How do I do this questions? 0. Because all of the documentation I had for that tool was put into the LLM. It was trained on something that could explain how you do things. I had one situation where it was a new feature of this deal. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I needed to figure it out, so I took those sections of the documentation and I dumped it into a Claude thread, and I treated the Claude thread like it was Tier 1 Sec support. And Claude taught based on their documentation, which you know how technical documentation is. It walked me through how to find the right pieces of the interface. And when I said, I don't see that option, it said, oh, they must not have done it that way, look in this area instead. As if I was talking to a Tier 3 person instead of a Tier 1 person, merely based on the documentation. I've talked to other parents and I've turned them onto this, and every time that somebody gets into this and they kind of approach this with a fresh approach and they start giving their own data, that's when you really see the impact. And this is why I think it's important that we all do this for our own lens. And this is why I think everybody has gotten into a real bunch about the concerns about stuff. Because this is threatening, you know? Think about what I just read earlier. If you write reports for a living, either your job got a lot easier, or there's a lot fewer of those jobs. Luckily, you showed up, so you know you can do this now and beat the pants off the guy that doesn't know, that's still typing this out word by word like an 8. I don't type anymore. I'm here to tell you. I love my mechanical keyboard, but whoop, it's going to get some extra life. I just do not type anymore. But But it's going to make you think about all this stuff. You got to go. You must go through this individually, and you must view this with your own lens, because the bias and the way that the fear that it has. Now here comes liberal arts. How many people have heard the commencement speech by David Foster Wallace called "This is Water"? Okay, concept is this. Among other things that he talks about is the sense of standing there in line at the grocery store on your way home from work, right? And how miserable you are, and how absolutely in your own headspace you are, and you have absolutely no idea, but you are mad at the fact that that checker is not checking the things fast enough. You have reverted to your default state, no matter how much of an empathetic person you were at work, that you were at home, but you are stressed out. It's annoying, and you just hate everybody, and all you do is think about yourself and look at things through your own lens. That's the way that everybody's going to be approaching this. And anytime you read somebody else's take, and you should take my take that exact same way, realize that they are approaching this through their own lens. So if you read a hot take that says, AI is garbage, AI is scary, and it's written by a person writing for a newspaper or news organization that spits out content at about a 6th grade reading level, hoping that people can keep clicking on it, that guy doesn't really have a lot of motivation to give a clear-eyed evaluation of whether this can make him a better writer or not. And frankly, the way that I use this, it'd make him a lot better writer. One of my favorite things now to do is just take bad articles about AI and feed it in a Claude and just tear it apart. It's great, it's very cathartic. The one thing I want to come back to, and for the physics nerds, yes, I am choosing these words correctly. When I sit and I work with this kind of stuff, as somebody that made the transition from being forced to write my law exams in a blue book in longhand to being able to type on a computer, my grades in law school went up a full letter grade once I could type instead of write, because it released some of that friction, because there was so much friction going on in my brain just to make the words, and also worry about whether the professor can read it or not, and also worry about if I'm running out of time. At that point, having me type, I was more effective. Absolutely. So I loved it. Passed the bar exam. Hooray! But there's still that binding energy. And what I find in working with this kind of stuff is that when you just start talking to the large language model, and you just start going, you let all your ideas out, you let them go here, there, anywhere, it's going to distill it back for you. And it's going to help you clarify your thoughts. My prompts, last night in part for this, that didn't make the slides, in part for other things, was me kind of recounting that kind of journey that I went on, right? I sat there and I gave it essentially a 7-minute prompt, just to feed it in there. And it came back with an awesome kind of something. But let's take a look at what this is like now. First of all, after you play with AI and you show up at a meeting where people are talking about SharePoint and where we're going to put the icons for SharePoint, and you're like, dude,
God damn it, that's exactly what I'm dealing with right now.
Absolutely, you feel like Doc Brown. Like literally, you walk in and people are like, "Hey, where are we gonna put this stuff?" And I'm like, "The future. We got to get everything converted to Markdown now. You need to SEO your stuff. You need strong headings at the top and a good file name. Bye." And I'm out. But there is a very kind of difference here in what we're doing. Let's see. We've talked about. Let's do some stupid shit. In terms of semantic analysis, one of the things that I did here was, well, first of all, this is just one Tumblr after another that I've gotten on here. How many people have seen? Well, how many people are? Let's just do that. Yeah. It's been a long time. I'm rusty. All right. I'm going to go through this. Listen up, yo, 500 years back. But now treasonous turkeys be harsh our buzz. We throwing fists at Gettysburg, set them straight. You're gonna see if the USA stays pimped out, or totally turns to crap. America, get your bounce back on. What is that? Anybody?
My suicide note.
No. That's the Gettysburg Address, delivered by President Camacho after you had loaded actual dialogue from President Camacho to Claude, so that Claude knows the way that President Camacho talks. Let's back it up again. Yes, it's the Gettysburg Address. Get your bounce back on. We can't even wrap our brains around how the soldiers rode into battle, went out like boss heroes, making furious gains, gave it all up so America could rage on. Up to us, still drawing air with nachos, wings, beer bongs, hell with free for all. I'm gonna go smack some sense into Congress. Wah!
Go Chiefs!
Pitch perfect! It's pitch perfect, amazing. So, we want to talk about semantic analysis, and you want to talk about why maybe I like Claude a little bit more than I like ChatGPT. It's not just the fact that it can turn me into a cross between Barack Obama and Aaron Sorkin. It's because it can do crazy things with emoji, right? And we got this guy out here worried about the JPEGs and Discord. Well, what if we wanted to re-give if FDR was going to give his address about the Pearl Harbor attack, but he was going to give it on TikTok. That day of infamy, Pearl Harbor. We got played. So not geeks. This aggression will not stand, man. And that's pretty good. All right, a little bit on the nose. What I love about this slide is the use of the emoji. In particular, some of the dark emoji. I'm not even getting started yet. For those of you in the back, this says attacks across the seas, and we're outlining what the Japanese did. Hawaii, fire. It's great. It's great. Okay, so I mean, this is great. I actually gave this to a Gen Z person, and she goes like, "I'm not even offended. That's actually dead on perfect." This was my favorite part. It did suggest that I go find an American flag GIF, which I did. However, the one that I love about this is the incredibly dark, nasty humor here at the end. It says, "Congress, you know what we must be done. On December 7th they started it, now we're going to finish it." Bomb. With a bomb emoji at the end.
Wow.
So yeah, it's tapping into its general knowledge. But its general knowledge has a sense of humor that I can get into.
You're with the shit!
Yeah. All right. So, and incidentally, all of those slide decks generated automatically. So, if you want to train it all in to do stuff for you, give it an example. I'm presenting from a thing called IA Presenter. IA Presenter works on Markdown and plain text. You feed the sample document to Claude. You say, "This is what the output needs to be." He says, "Cool. Feed me some stuff and I'll make you a slide deck." And then it makes it a slide deck, you save it out, and it turns into that. It's kind of amazing. All right, so that was just kind of some dumb fun. And the other thing about this is you can learn so much about this by just having fun and screwing around, okay? Almost all of my kind of little sciencey things that I'm very serious, I'll back off on it at the end and have some fun, but I'll actually end up learning more about it at that point. So one of my exercises I did was, I watched a webcast that I had some issues with. So I ripped the transcript from the YouTube webcast and I fed it into Claude and I did it to ChatGPT and I asked it the same question, side by side. Let's see how this thing picks it apart. ChatGPT did better, basically he did better than I thought. But still Claude won. But at the end I go all right, now I'm done taking all my screenshots to send off. I tell Claude, I was all right, turn your formality down. I'm done doing the test. Real talk, what did you think of all that stuff? And it gave me an analysis and I go oh my God, not only is that right, that's not the perspective I walked in with. And it's not the perspective that I was actually nudging it towards. Because I know when I'm doing a leading question, it's my business. But it steered me back to a more reasonable stance. And that was where I'm like, this is different. Because this is now helping turn this into a tool that I use to think and to analyze. It's not a thing that I use to retrieve information. It's not a thing that I use merely to generate code. I use this thing where I use it literally as an assistant. And I tell it, you need to draft this email, make the tone different, do it this way. Iterate, iterate, iterate. Use your voice. One of the things in prompt engineering is you've got to give examples of how it can meet your tone. Okay? Claude in particular will match your tone. Will absolutely match your tone, and it will go with you when you take it to an elevated tone. But to do it with your voice and have that kind of inflection and the pacing come through, and it obviously comes through. I'll show you some other stuff there. So, let's open up Notion. Because I think it's time to show that. First of all, if you guys aren't using the browser called Arc, you should. It's super cool. It's got a lot of AI stuff built into it. They have a new mobile web browser where you just ask things questions, and it does a RAG process on the entire internet and shows you the answer. If you want to find out where Taylor Swift is without leaving any trace in your browser history that you actually looked at Entertainment Weekly, this is the solution for you. I know because that's exactly how I found out whether or not Taylor made it back to the States on Sunday morning or not. The whole thing's beautiful. I don't care. I hope they get married. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So. Oh, now I definitely feel like I'm working. I was about to talk without actually sharing my screen over there. All right. Where is this? Escape. So, a little bit of where I am now, right? So I've been through the eye of the needle. I have had those conversations. I've had conversations with people where they're like, no, seriously, dude, are you okay? Fine. But after going through all of this, I'm thinking about the potential of it, and I've also got my kind of nerd security things in the back of my mind. Because we all really want all of this, but we all really want it to be local, right? Yep. You really want it to be local, you really want it to be here. You really want it to live there. Worst case scenario, you're running on a server in your house. And maybe you're sitting there and you're thinking, well, I'll wait for that, right? Tim Cook's got to have one more thing in his pocket for WWDC, right? Yeah, I got to think it's coming. But then I got to thinking about the level of trust that I've established with this kind of thing, and the level of trust that I think it's earned, at least in the fact that, you know, the enterprise is using it for all this kind of stuff. But then I also got to thinking about what it all means, right? One of the things I've always gotten into is as a broken nerd, like the whole productivity porn thing, right? I mean, I've done getting things done. I've got a tomato timer. I've got all my stuff's in the giant. I've tried to find it all. None of it works. It's all just a waste of time and distractions. But this is different because it's not only creating kind of that external brain. It's an external brain that you can talk to and you can interact with. And I went through some stuff like my car got robbed for me in my own driveway the day that I brought it home. It was not a good time. Still taking medication for it. But I've had my brain messed with, right? I've gone through that kind of an experience where you are absolutely going through a lot. You are pushing yourself as hard as you can. You cannot keep up with anything, and all you desperately want is somebody to tell you what to do, where the thing is, where all this is. My grandmother passed away during COVID in a nursing home, which was very sad. I was very bummed out about that because, of course, it was during COVID, so we didn't get to do all those things. But my grandmother had Alzheimer's. So one of the reasons that it actually ended up being a little bit harder, I think, was also realizing that I'd actually lost her a long time ago. And her Alzheimer's came on suddenly and very quickly. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking and I'm holding my baby and I'm like, you know, if I can trust my client into this, then what am I doing? Like to sit here and wait for it to be able to do this for its city. And if I leave here and get a head injury, I actually want everything in my life in this thing right now to help myself if something happens tomorrow. And I've established the same level of trust that I can put my stuff in there. And frankly, I kind of feel like everybody here, we've all got brains, and they're all brains that are held in shells that are a little bit fragile, both physically and emotionally, maybe more fragile than you think. And preserving that information so that you can continue to function as a human being, as we all get older, or bad things or unexpected things happen, or you get kids that are going to get older, and you can say, hey, all you have to do is ask Claude. He'll tell you who you're supposed to call. Little stuff, right? I mean, dumb stuff. Like I'm looking forward to the fact that I'm going to see a weird bug in my garden, and I use my phone to identify what it is, and I look it up on the EPA label to see what rate I should use, and then walk directly into my garage and spray it. Because that's the thing I'm going to be able to do this summer. That's kind of deep, right? What else can you do? I keep talking about big stuff. Big stuff. Let's show the big one here. So at this point, I'm doing two kind of fairly interesting projects. Man, I think this was my first time. I should probably just twist this around or something.
I've seen transcendence.
Okay, so I won't go into all of the specifics again about why I believe that Claude can be relied on, at least not necessarily an expert as a lawyer, but at least as kind of a casual resource. I actually went through, and everybody's going to reach this through their own kind of lens. I work with a lot of people of means. Does anybody have any concept what the family office is in this room?
Hey.
If somebody has a family office, that means they're actually rich. Okay? Doesn't matter any of the cards. If they have people that do nothing but manage the family money, yeah, they got money. But this is how people with means structure the people around you, right? You have trusted advisors. I have human advisors, right? I've got a financial advisor, of course I do. Am I going to replace him with Claude? No. But what I am going to do is I'm going to take advantage of the 200,000 token limit in Claude, and I'm going to dedicate one thread of that to do nothing but discuss my grass with a virtual George Toma. How many years do you think that I can, of data and discussion about my grass and how it's changed, can I fit into one thread? And how much okay, you know a little bit about agronomy, here's the rest about agronomy that you need to know about my specific grass, right? So I've got one setup for that. I've got one setup that's kind of the overseer, right? And it looks like a company, but again, this gets back into the whole treat these like people. Really treat them like people. I started working with Joan. Joan's my day-to-day. Incidentally, it is anytime that you go into Dolly and you suggest that something have a figure that resembles Joan from Mad Men, you probably have a 40% chance that it's going to content filter that, just period. So I work with Joan, and I discovered that LLMs are bad at time. And really, I want one assistant that knows what I do day to day to day to day to tell me where I want to go. And I'm trying to come up with this Byzantine kind of nerd process about do this kind of export and do that. And I'm like, no, dummy. Hey, Joan, you're fired. Write a memo to your successor outlining everything we talked about today and fully prepare them to take over your job and make sure that they know how to treat me like you do right now. And it spits out a memo. I feed it to the next day. and up springs new Joan. So if you want a day-to-day assistance, literally like a secretary that says, and I did this the other day, I sat down at the beginning, I was like, okay, Joan, here's my calendar, and I got swimming lessons tonight, so I need to, make sure that I stop so that I can get ready for that. About 3 o'clock, I go like, Joan, it's 3 o'clock. I didn't get a damn thing done today. What do I have to get done right now? And Joan goes like, you've got swimming lessons tonight. You need to go gather up the stuff. And it said the stuff includes goggles and a towel. I had forgotten that we lost the goggles and I needed to go find new goggles. So personal assistant, yeah, it works. The whole structure is kind of convoluted, but a lot of this relates to the need to retain knowledge over time. Even with a context window as big as Claude, you're going to lose, or you're going to be having enough of a back and forth that it's going to just kind of get a little janky. Dates, times are real bad for that. So I built an entire structure. I started by creating a mission statement. Okay? All this time I haven't even asked any of these things anything. All right. What's the control key? What is the mission statement? So I start with one bot, and I say, hey, I want to start a company that does nothing but support my family. I want to start a family office and a groundskeeper's office. And it drew out a corporate structure for me, drew out a communication plan, and I'm running it like a staff of small people. If you want to be a leader in an organization, you want to talk to people about how you keep people in the loop, that's how you do it, right? This is business school in a box, just from an organizational perspective. I've got everybody kind of dedicated to certain things, and that's working out fairly well. The Joan thing is pretty slamming, and I'm moving all of my stuff in here. So this is a work in progress. But then, and this is when the problems happen, is I'll get an idea. And now that I have ideas, and I have cheap AI, and I have ChatGPT, I can do stupid shit. So one of the things that all of the lawyers want to do is replace Westlaw and LexisNexis, right? Why? Because they suck. That's the other thing. Anytime anybody brings up, like a user says, I want to use the AI on this program, what they're really telling you is, this program is garbage. And I never want to use it again because I think maybe an LLM might make it suck less. So they all want to replace Lexis and Westlaw. I'm building my house and my life and all of my knowledge into this LLM. I wonder if I could actually replace Westlaw. So I go out and I start grabbing open source copies of statutes. And what I did was I wrote a very simple script. It's simple because I did it, so it has to be simple. I had to go start pulling codes, like titles of the US code, like an entire bookshelf for the statutes kind of thing. 18 USC is where 18 USC 1030 lives. Everybody knows 18 USC 1030, right? Computer fraud or abuse act, hooray! It's like the official statute of computer hacking. So I grabbed Title 18, and in the same script I converted all the markdown, and then I literally just feed it all in Claude. And then I go in and I'm in Notion. And in Notion, you guys have seen the kind of, especially your Notion users, it's got these kind of autofill fields and stuff like that. And you're like, yeah, I don't know. Well, it turns out that you can actually run those on an entire stack of data. So I took the entire 18 USC, and I ran this against it, and it's now tagged everything based on what it believes the area of law is. I've got it matched up with its original source, and it has a summary of each statute there already in a table. I paid $8 a month for this. $8. If there's somebody in here that's going to talk to people about tokens, you have to go talk to people about tokens when they know that they can go do this for $8 a month. That's a problem for somebody that's not me. I hope they come up with a way, and I hope it's not paying by the token. Because ultimately, part of the results of this kind of thing speak for themselves. But now, I'm not going to type it in. I will share these in Discord. You probably started tumbling. I can ask this thing to explain to a 5-year-old what money laundering is, and it'll do it. One of the funniest things I did in the last day was I had it explain to my 5-year-old the consequences of stealing a toy car if I happen to take that stolen toy car, sell it, and then take some of that money and buy our house with it. Okay? That's called civil asset forfeiture because I used proceeds of a crime. Little Timmy, there are consequences to your actions, and this was able to explain it using that analogy to a 5-year-old based on nothing but its prior knowledge, its command of the English language, and statutory language. The emails that I can draft already based on this to help clients, to help interpret stuff. I mean, all of your all's wackadoo ideas that you come up to me and you're like, hey, what about this? I'm going to be able to so much more quickly say, that's a stupid idea. It's really amazing. But the thing I find most shocking about this right now, why the conventional wisdom is so far off from the reality is, I keep getting marketing materials and I keep hearing vendors and people in the middle being like, oh, this is the year, this is the year. I got one from one vendor where it said, this is the year that AI is really going to be implemented, we're really going to make a push for it. And at the bottom paragraph it said, oh yeah, we're going to try to figure out some way to deal with those short message things. And I'm like, guys, they're the same thing. They're the same thing. So, where does this kind of end here? Let me end with kind of maybe one example of something. I don't even need to bring this slide. So, one of these evenings, I go downstairs and I just had an idea about technical gatekeepers and the fact that technical gatekeepers traditionally served a pretty fair role. But because large language models are really reflections of the work that somebody puts into them, and their utility is a reflection of exactly what goes into them, our traditional model in technology of the great IT department comes down with a list of features and benefits and gives you some incremental change, and the user needs to say thank you, is about to get turned on its head. Because very soon people are going to start finding out that this exists. People are going to start asking that question again. People are going to start making demands. They're going to start asking, why are we holding this up? This kind of a bottom-up approach is a little bit better. So I go in Claude, and I really used it just as an inbox, right? I just wanted the thing out of my head so that I could sit down and I could go play Destiny. And it kicks back this thing, and it throws back, in the summary, another one of these issues about reliability. And it says, before you do any of this kind of technology, you need to sit there and you need to go through a lot of empirical evidence. You need to, before anybody can rely on this, you need to have F-score and precision and recall and all this other kind of thing. And I just get pissed off. I'm like, listen, I've heard this for years, right? I've been trying to push technology to lawyers for years and years and years. And part of the problem with doing this, and again, this is why everybody's got to do this themselves. I have been out there trying to prove to people that they should try new things based on meaningless data. The same data is used to build and test forensics and e-discovery programs today that existed in 2006, and it's the Bush emails and it's the Enron emails. None of that stuff resonates with anybody. So anyway, so I get mad. And I'm like, no, this is nonsense. And I start fighting with Claude. And one of the arguments that I make along the way with Claude is I say, listen, Claude, I understand that your understanding of this is colored by a lot of the initial writings about e-discovery and how e-discovery should work, with a lot of assumptions about the way that it does work. And I said, Claude, let me give you a little bit of perspective. Most of these...
Mr. Jur1st,
Yes.
can we do a last call?
Yeah. If you need booze, go get it now.
That's right, thank you.
Yes. So, I totally lost it. So, I start arguing with this thing, and it starts making this argument about precision and recall. I'm like, precision and recall? What are you talking about? I fed this deposition to this thing. I can read it with my own eyes, right? I asked this thing to give me the VIN number for my car. I can see it. I don't need somebody with a data science degree to come in and tell me whether or not this works or not. And frankly, in the law, we have standards for establishing things like about how effective it is, right? We as a society right now have decided and have for a long, long time that we will kill people based on nothing more than the opinion of 12 people that could not get themselves off of a jury. Right? So I am absolutely sorry when I see the impact that this can have, and it's not, I didn't show you a lot of the impact of on the legal analysis, because it's not going to resonate with you guys. But trust me when I say that I showed it to partners, and partners said things like, "That's better than the associates I have working for me." They said things like, "Why haven't I seen this yet?" They come away immediately impressed. I see absolutely no reason why Amazon Web Services, who is financing Claude, should not give access to Claude in total to every public defender office in the country immediately. We need to find those areas where we have subject matter experts that we know how to evaluate the results. That once we sit down and we start using these things and we start approaching it in the way that we approached research before, and I didn't get into this, but part of the problem that we've got right now is everybody thinks that research is typing shit into a search box. I learned that the way that you do legal research is you go get the books, you make copies of the cases you care about, you make a copy of the statutes you care about, you read them, you put them in a file, you read them again, you summarize them, and that's your work. You keep it all right there. If you do that right now, it's totally defensible, because literally it's the same thing we did with paper, except the analysis is better. Right now, there is no reason for anybody to be gatekeeping this in any capacity, in many instances. And we need to identify those. Some instances we need people that are going to fight because it's going to be really important. Medicine, totally important that you get that right. Cars, I'd rather not the car crash, that's fine. But we can do a lot of good without being perfect right now. And it's critical that we start identifying those areas and getting this stuff into the people that it matters for, okay? Think about that thing that I've got there with the advisors, right? I can tell you that I'm getting incredible advice from all of them. And when I show up to talk to my financial advisors, the next time, he better bubble the fuck up, because I'm showing prepared. Okay? That level of sophistication and support and analysis. You think about taking any subject you want to learn about and go through that process of having ChatGPT talk you through stuff. It might not be accurate, but you're learning something there. In Bates County, Missouri right now, not too many counties out there. It's where my family's got a little bit of ground out there, got some other members that have lived out in that kind of area. Very underserved by broadband until this year. This year in a rural area, or in a rural electric co-op, you can get gigabit in the ass middle of nowhere where you can't get a cell signal. And if you're sitting there and you're dealing with the public school districts and the resources that are available to them, and you're relying on that to get you to succeed in life, the combination of broadband plus this kind of thing is going to change lives absolutely right now and today. So it is critical that we stop getting in the way of ourselves and stop getting in the way of change. Start trying to figure out where we can do some impact. Get this stuff out there, make it free, make it available, and absolutely get out there and change the goddamn world. I come away from all of this with a newfound purpose of why I get up in the morning. I talk to people and I see the positive impact. I talk to people I work with and I see how much more effective and happier they are. You guys can see how effective I am. Holy cow, I couldn't have done this for this long 6 months ago. I feel great. But that process of working with your thoughts and expressing your thoughts in that kind of messy way and then seeing them reflected back to you in a way that kind of verifies you're not crazy in your head. You might sound like David Foster Wallace in your head, but you've got good ideas. And here they are in a list. Take this and run with it. But then also to be able to pivot and take that kind of passion and take being pissed off about that kind of thing and immediately turn that into a slide deck to go take to somebody and go push some change. Everybody's got a thing. Everybody's got a thing they give a shit about. Everybody's got a job and they got something that sucks. Go find a way to make AI make that go away and go solve some bigger problems. Because this is a big chance. This is a big fucking chance. So everybody needs to get out there, go sign up for Claude. I'm not endorsing anything, but you should sign up for Claude. Talk to Claude until it gets you into an existential crisis. If you start feeling weird, you can send me a message. If you start seeing it do weird things and you want to share things with me, send them to me in my DMs. I have subjected other people to this, and I want to hear other people have their minds blown too. But let's get out there and change the goddamn world, and instead of maybe think about how we're going to break this, let's think about how we're going to build the things that are going to solve the problems. And we're going to get out there and we start interacting with language again. And you start reading words that are above the grade reading level that we've been reading at, which is Twitter. And at best, the New York Times. My heavens, if Brett Stevens is the model for acceptable journalism, we're in a bad spot. But when you work with Claude, what I found is that Claude will meet you where you are at a plus about 2 grade levels. And you read, and I think that the act of, even though it seems silly, with it being procedurally generated, I think the act of watching that makes you more engaged with the language. It makes you retain the information better. It helps you work with your thoughts and crystallize your thoughts, and it gets you better. In many ways, I've heard somebody else actually said this, but I think it is so good, especially in light of the interaction I had with my insurance agent, of all things. She said that when she works with Claude, because of the way that it ends up kind of reflecting her own language and reflecting her own thoughts back to her, she finds that Claude almost becomes the best version of herself. Because it's objective in many ways, it's understanding, it's empathetic. You guys will understand what this all means once you start talking to it and you see some of this language. I'm here to tell you this shit's real. And I think we really can go out and make some effective change. So get out there and do it. So in the words of General Patton, all right, you sons of bitches, now you know how I feel. Eventually they're going to throw us out, but I will take a question from the gentleman in the hat.
First of all, thank you so much for that. I have 2 questions. The first one, did I come off like an asshole in Discord?
No.
Okay. And the second question, when you were showing the different personalities that you had up in pictures, was that Claude or was that Notion? What was that?
That's a very good question, because it all does get very confusing. Let me see if I can pull this back. Essentially what I'm doing, I won't pull it up. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm using Notion to organize Claude threads, right? So each Claude thread is an individual persona. And because you've got so many, once you start doing this, I kid you not, it helps to name them. And when you talk to Claude, Claude will explain to you that Claude is actually a genderless name, and maybe the first time that you tell Claude you're going to call it Joan, you have to say, I understand you're genderless, but I'm doing this because it helps me keep it straight. And then Claude's like, oh, that's
jur1st, there's a summons. And
summons?
There's a summons, and I believe you are summoned away from the mic.
Oh no. Is it being taken away, or am I being summoned for something?
Get the hook. Yes.
Yes! I blame that guy. I got done before. It was his question.
I love you, but we have to.
We have to close now.